Time is 5:04, and I hereby convene a workshop meeting of the City Commission. Thank you all for being here. The agenda is short and sweet, which is a good thing. It shouldn't run more than about 3 or 4 hours. I know we have to put by 11:30. Even if you make the motion, I'm going to vote against it tonight. Anyway, I want to apologize for the last meeting going so long on the sidewalk issue. I'm going to take my personal moment here and throw in my 2 cents worth about it. I apologize for how long that went. I apologize that we landed on a political solution to a problem that was really code-based, and it made some real problems. I knew it at the time, but we had to finish the meeting, and I think we did without too much bloodletting, I hope. I was kind of embarrassed for the city in many ways, but I don't want to spell those out too clearly. But for my part, I'll apologize for the things I did wrong. But here we are today, and hopefully make it better. And I am not the person to speak on that, because I'm just not. I'll turn it over to the city administrator or to the city attorney, whoever wants to start the ball rolling.
Can I ask a question
Yes,
about the agenda?
Yes.
This is hardly anything on this agenda. Why can't we get this out in a timely manner?
Actually, we don't even need the agenda. Just put it out to have it.
Well, the citizens feel that they need an agenda. So, I mean, I don't know what it would hurt to put one out for a workshop.
That's probably a reasonable request. Certainly, I would never hold a meeting, and this is just me personally, I would never hold a meeting that had anything controversial on it without good notice. Although for a workshop meeting where it's simply discussion, there's a much lower bar to clear for having something on the agenda. But certainly if we were going to do a regular meeting or a special meeting, not having something on the agenda is critical. If it's not there for as much time as is reasonable possible.
Well, the sidewalk wasn't on the last agenda, it lasted so long.
I know. But anything can come up in the meeting, and we can act on anything, whether it's agenda or not. And that was a good example of that. But as far as I'm concerned, your point is well taken. When we can get an agenda out ahead of time, it would be helpful. Back over to you, or do you want to weigh in on that?
Well, no, the other thing I was just going to give you a little preamble for everybody in the same direction at the same time. We did have that discussion you were referencing at the commission meeting, and there was action taken. The commission then asked the staff to review everything to do with sidewalks. We did send you some minutes of the 1888 December meeting of the commission saying that they were demanding that a sidewalk be repaired. That was 2 months after we became incorporated. So this is not a new topic. It has happened in the past, way in the past. And there have been various codes written about it. We being the staff, met with Scott and Derek a week ago, yesterday or tomorrow, rather. No, what is today, Tuesday? A week ago today. To talk about that particular meeting and what are the codes that we are dealing with. And they are somewhat contradictory, but for that, I will send it over to Scott, who will explain what our code requirements are, and we have some recommendations that Scott will mention on where we should go from here.
Let me just start making a statement. I think the biggest part of the problem we had was failure to communicate with clients. Before the company. I truly believe that's the biggest thing, and I believe that's on the commission to direct staff. That your job is to make sure you assist people to get to where they want to go. I don't think that's where I think we failed. The biggest part. Now there are some holes in here, and we need to do that work. But I think if we don't address the initial one, which is making sure that staff does everything on their part to educate the client and make them aware of significant expenses. Okay? If somebody gets charged an extra $50 at the end of the thing, it's not a big deal. But $15,000 is a lot of money. And so that's where I think we fail.
long as we're discussing it. I put a, pushback's not the right word, but maybe disagree a little bit. Yes, there's an incumbent need on staff or incumbent, anyway, it's good for staff to inform people of everything they possibly can, particularly significant expenses. There's no doubt about that. However, also the codes are right here, and have been for a long time, pretty much the same as they are now, with only a few minor ways to clean them up, I think. We'll see as the meeting goes on. And the contractor involved knows the code, and I think there was a failure there as well. And contractors are bound by the code, and they're supposed to know the code, and at the last minute well, maybe not at the last minute, like I said, I don't want to characterize things too much, but I think there was a failure there as well by the contractor to
I think a lot of
follow
people,
the code.
I think a lot of people make mistakes.
Yep, I agree.
But I don't look, it's not my job to look.
It's not my job to fix the
It's not my
contractor's
job to look
mistakes.
at the homeowner. It's my job to look at me and look at staff. That's my job.
That's fair.
That's fair. That's what I'm looking to fix.
But we will always, anyway. Okay, that's fair.
Learn from our
We're not going to
mistakes.
that, I think,
It's not a big
you're
deal.
right, I'm not totally disagreeing with you.
Yeah.
Just adding a layer.
Yeah, no,
Mr. Commissioner?
there's enough blame to go with it.
Yeah. Yeah, there is.
I kind of agree with both of you in part. When I looked through all the ordinances and everything involving the biggest confusion I found was between the comp plan and our ordinance don't match. And there's some minor issues with the ordinance that I'm talking about. But in the ordinances, there's a guideline on site development that explains everything needs to be reviewed for, so I find it to be on our administrator and staff not following our ordinances and advising the developer or the residents, even though the developer's a long-time resident of Lake Helen and is on the board that approves some of the ordinances and should know that they shouldn't be using the ordinances to finagle ways of getting out of doing something. And I mean, when I went through training in the fire service and everything, they taught us about all the legal and everything, and the biggest thing they pushed in the legal thing was ignorance of the law is not a defense. So we need to start holding our people accountable for not doing their job in the proper plans review where the failure occurred on the sidewalk, because in the list of items, sidewalks is one of those items. So we have to deal with it the way we can, and the information we had at the meeting is what we had to deal with. We didn't get good references from our staff to be able to make a proper decision, but we made the best decision we could at the time.
Appreciate that. Well, you're the only one that weighed in yet. Do you want to?
Not at this time.
Okay, that's fine. I think it's back over to you.
Okay, let's quickly talk about what the rules currently say, and the rules I reviewed. We have some of them passed out. We start with 11.5.0, and that says, number 1, that projects abutting collector or arterial facility shall provide sidewalks adjacent to collector or arterial road. One of the confusing things is if you go down to 6, it says sidewalks shall be required to be constructed on any new or redeveloped individual or subdivided residential or non-residential development site. I think some have interpreted 6 to mean every piece of property that gets built on has to have a sidewalk. The problem is that conflicts with 1, because 1 says it's only collector or arterial roads. And then we have another provision in our gateway that says any road, structure built on a road in the gateway has to have a sidewalk on that. So that was one of the confusing things. My interpretation is sidewalks are only required on arterial collector. And 6 makes it clear that whether it's commercial, residential, new construction, redevelopment of construction, you still have to do it on arterial collectors. Otherwise, one of the rules of construction is you don't interpret something and make something else inconsistent. So if you interpret 6 to say every new home, commercial, residential, redeveloped, whatever, has to have a sidewalk regardless of the type of street it's on. Now you just invalidated one.
You don't need one.
You don't need one. So that's not a consistent interpretation. One of the things I also saw, maybe what was Roger referring to, section 14.04 talks about site development plan submittal. And it does say in there that sidewalks are supposed to be on site development plans. However, if you go back and you read section 14.01.00, subsection 1, it says a local development order shall be issued to indicate approval of any site plan, subdivision, or subdivision lot. And you go down to 4, that same section, it says, a local development order shall not be required when a single-family home on an existing single-family lot is built. So we say, yes, a site plan, you gotta have sidewalks, but then every single-family home built on an existing single-family lot is not required to have a site plan. Therefore, they're not required to show us where the sidewalks are. So that's where you kind of get into catch-22. Now, when we have new subdivisions, the subdivision regulations require sidewalks to be shown. So really what this creates a problem with is, you have a lot of old lots in this city that will get developed. Somebody wants to go in on a single-family lot and build a house on it. And if it's not on an arterial collector, the way I interpret it, it's not required. And because you're building a single-family home on an existing lot, you're not required to submit a site plan, which is what will show you where the sidewalk is. So site plans are not required for every type of development, and it's a site plan that requires the sidewalk. So in the staff meeting, we definitely said we need to make sure that sidewalks, if they're going to, where required, and that should also sit, but where they're going to be required, they need to be on whatever is submitted to get the permit, whether it's a site plan or not. Whatever gets submitted to get a building permit, we need to make sure not only sidewalks, but any other major issue you brought up is reflected on there. This is something we need to make sure it's on there. So we talked about that. And we talked about, it's really also a decision. Where do you want sidewalks to have to be placed? I mean, do you want them everywhere in the city? Do you still want to provide for, y'all having the discretion to say it's not required, or you got to pay a fee into the sidewalk fund? It doesn't say how that fee is calculated. We do it based on the current contract that the county has for sidewalk installation. Whether or not that's a good method or not, I don't know. But, at least the last applicant said I could build a sidewalk a lot cheaper than that price, because we just look at the size of the sidewalk and the cost of the concrete that they have. But I think the first question is, where do y'all want sidewalks? Where do you say that they have to have sidewalks? I mean, Derek had the idea of saying, and I think Lee kind of trying to do about, maybe we should have an area, designated area in the map that says, in this area you have to put the sidewalk in if you're going to build here. But maybe in other areas it's not required. And you have some areas, just looking at this map, and I don't, unfortunately, I don't know the cities super well, but you look at for that, it looks like you have a lot of subdivided areas over here where you got Main Street and Ohio. Those areas look like they're pretty well developed. When you get on from that, it looks like it's more open space. So I don't know if those are areas that would be a future subdivision. Now, if a subdivision comes in, the subdivision requirements will require them to put sidewalks in the subdivision. But I don't know if we want to require, like, for that to have a sidewalk. That has a sidewalk already?
On
both sides.
On both sides?
It does on both sides.
So, okay. So the county's put a sidewalk there?
On one
That
side.
was for the school, purpose of the school.
School, okay. So, but these are, I think that's kind of the question, where are we going to require them to have sidewalks, is question one. Question two is, if we're going to allow people either the commission to decide it's not practical, we need to really give some guidance to y'all in the code, other than, because Lee and I met with the applicant, and outline, this is the process. You know, we can't make decisions, staff can't make decisions, it's gotta go to the commission. If you're not gonna put the sidewalk in, you have to go to the commission and ask. And either it's not practical, or they can all approve you paying a fee into the fund, but that's a commission decision. She was advised of that. And there's not much more I can tell, that's what the code says, and the code doesn't get into definitions. So that, she was advised of that in advance, and what I told her I would say at the commission meeting is exactly what I told you. I said, I think there ought to be a sidewalk on Main, but not on High. That's what I told her I was gonna say, and that's what I said. Nothing changed between my conversation with her one-on-one and what I said in the public meeting. But that's really the question. I think, at least for me, and that maybe wants to, get chime in and some guys. What do y'all want? Where do you want the sidewalks? And I mean, this might sound insensitive or harsh. It's really easy to sit here and draft a rule to say, okay, this is what we're going to do. It does absolutely no good when we draft a rule, and then when it comes back to you, you don't enforce it. What's the point of the rule? So let's be realistic here. Where do you want sidewalks? And where are you going to tell people, no, you've got to pay X number of dollars? I think the guy that came up that wanted to piggyback Kayla's case, I think we resolved him because he's not on our arterial program. But if we're saying we want it everywhere, do you, in his particular situation, is that somebody you want to require to put a sidewalk in or pay into the fund? I don't know. That's because it's a very, very tough thing to give you guidance on, because putting in a sidewalk is just going to be on a person's property, and there's no chance of realistically development on either side. Doesn't make a lot of sense. But if you're in an area, you may be the first one to develop in an area, but it's likely or foreseeable that sidewalks could come in. That's different. Now, what is foreseeable and what is unlikely? It's kind of hard to put into words. So it's put on paper, but that's really, from my perspective, what I like to get out of today, so I can work with staff to come up with new regulations. I think for sure we're going to require it at permitting, even though they may not be required to submit a site plan. So we're going to do that.
That was the original thing I was going to ask you before I make a suggestion, was that why isn't it required to have a site plan for, what did you say?
It's just in the code.
Can that code be changed?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Because to me, that sounds like a simple solution, because if it has to have a site plan to build a house, and your sidewalks have to be on the site plan.
Well, what it says is no local development orders needed to do the following. Single-family home on an existing residential lot. There is no increase in the amount of impervious surface within the development. The number of dwelling units does not change by 5% or more. There is no change in the floor area ratio. There is no modification in the original design concept, such as a change in housing types, building scale, compatibility factors. There is no change in the land use or zoning categories on the approved site plan. There's no increase in traffic volume, flow, points of ingress, egress. There's no reduction of required setbacks. There's no reduction in the number of parking spaces. There's no change in parking lot design. There's no reduction in landscaping or buffering, or commercial industrial multifamily may add an accessory structure up to 5,000 square feet without a local development. I would say the first and the last one are, I can understand saying no site plan. But the first and the last one, if you're going to add a 5,000 foot structure, I think it's site plan.
Yeah.
And I think if you're building a house on a vacant lot.
And I don't know how you get around it, because to me, I've always looked at the site plan as the second layer. Your house will show you how to build your home. And your site plan will show you how to connect that home to the rest of the universe, whether it's a road, electricity, gas, water,
No,
etc.
you do have before you section 14.4.00. This is the requirements of site plan. So you can look through that and make sure there's about 21 requirements for a site plan. So that's what we were saying. And I can't tell you why. This is your code. Your code has said a single-family home on an existing residential lot does not need a site plan.
Yeah, and I think that's a problem. I think it gives us a partial solution to what we're doing, but I think it's a problem inevitably to where when anybody's going to build. I mean, site plans give you direction, and they give they give inspectors an opportunity to be able to look and see where things are supposed to go, and if they're being put where they're supposed to be put.
I would say just looking at it, Rick,
Yeah,
just
where
not
do you get that loophole from? Because I'd have turned in the site plan, just put a shed on the property.
says it right, you should have built a house.
And I don't live on a paved road.
No, it's not, it's
Site
not.
plan or survey? Both.
There,
They wanted to know where I was putting a shed at on the property. That's a site plan.
That's a survey.
That's a site plan. When you show where that shed is on the property, that's a site plan. Survey is where the property is in relation to that shed.
The site plans are very detailed in here.
All structures on the survey.
I mean, ours,
Which you said there was 15 and there's only 3.
I didn't say any.
Well, your predecessor.
Okay, thank you.
there's a lot of things that are required in the site plan. I don't, you know, I have to refer to others, such as just quickly looking through these things, let's see. Location of water bodies, the location of mean high water mark, topographical survey, soil report, grading plan, erosion control plan, the general floodplain indicating the area subject to inundation, high groundwater, the location of all buildings, I think are good, elevation of proposed structures, access points, driveways, location utilities, tree survey, some floor plan development. I don't know if that's normal for a site plan, does that seem pretty typical for a site plan?
just to get the definitions correct, the site plan is a multi-sheet civil document that shows you how to build roads, shows you sidewalk details, shows you water main installations, shows you stormwater. That's a site plan, and that's what I review for the city. A building permit contains some aspects of the site plan, like the location of your shed on the survey. That can be construed as a site plan. It really needs to be defined a little bit better, so that when I say site plan, everyone in the room knows what I'm talking about. And when you say site plan, or whatever term you come up with, and then when I'm working with Debbie on a building permit, which is not a site plan, it may contain a site plan for the permit, and it should. But there's just really a difference in what we're talking about here. A building permit is a single-family home. It's going to come in on an existing lot. There's no improvements to the exterior of that lot, i.e., with the exception of a driveway permit to the road itself. And that should show up on the building permit site plan. And it may be as simple as calling it a building permit site plan and being done with it. Yeah. But that's just my 2 cents on that. It's really important to get the definitions dialed in so that if someone is coming in for a 20-lot subdivision, they know what they have to do. And someone's coming in for a single-family independent contract, or permit, they know what to do. And I think that's the goal of tonight, to manage that. But the way I read the code, it's those 2 very distinct topics. And it's just worth getting it out there on the table so that we don't.
So you think we ought to create I don't call it a minor site plan, but maybe a building permit site plan for things that maybe this is a good list of things that are exempt from true site plans, but a building permit site plan, and list of things that we want to see on it, these things would not be, some of these things may not be exempt from that.
We'll call it half of them. You know what I mean? This list of what's required for a site plan. You know, for a single-family residential unit, you don't need to show, water bodies and wetlands.
Right.
If we're going to look at it from a building permit aspect, because the number 1 question is where's the floodplain? Just that due diligence as an engineer, where's the floodplain, where's the quad map, where's the outfall for the water to go? Yeah. So, and if the building structure is proposed in the floodplain, then there's another problem. They're going to get a laundry list of comments about how they're going to mitigate for that impact in that area. And, we've made a career out of solving those issues. So, but yeah, it would behoove us under building permit and site plan requirement, architectural plan requirements, the Florida building code is referenced frequently. But the survey is generally enough when they show the proposed structure, proposed driveway, they can just as easily show the proposed sidewalk. It's one line and an offset in CAD.
So when we get to whether or not an individual who's building in that spot they may or may not have to, if it's a place where we as a commission say, we want sidewalks here, then they may just have to have a building permit, or they may have to have development, a full development with a full site plan, based on whether they're single family or whether or not they meet these requirements for a full site plan. And so we've got to have that definition.
That's what they
Independent of where we,
kind of create.
those are two, I understand the need for definitions, and it is critical. And they should be spelled out clearly in this. But it really doesn't affect where we put sidewalks per se.
No, this is just how we make sure we enforce what you want to do.
Yeah.
So there's really two questions there.
Right.
Well, the question
How
is-
we clearly enforce.
I think any new construction should have a site plan.
The whole site plan?
Yeah.
So whatever.
It's a big expense for us.
I would call the site plan, the building site plan, that.
Residential site plan.
Yes, a different terminology than
Single family residential site plan, or?
what you and I are accustomed to seeing for development site.
You get a definition between a residential site plan and a development site plan,
Yeah.
which is like what they're putting up there on Lakeview would be a development site plan.
Right.
So you do a residential site plan would be a single family residence or a two-family residence or a four-family residence going on a new. Now, if it's an apartment, that's a commercial, it's got to go through the whole development process.
And it is required on every new house, and one of the requirements of the residential permit, a residential site plan that goes along with the construction drawings, is that the location of the driveway would be put on, the location of the sidewalks would be put on. And if they're not currently there, which they may or may not be, they would have to be put in. And the other thing that I would like to talk about is, you mentioned earlier, you want to be able to go back to the commission. I do. Because I personally believe that we cannot make rules that cover everything.
There will always be.
The one size fits all. There'll always be a one-off.
Yeah.
And I've got one I want to show you a little later. But I want to do that because, so people can have relief, okay? None of us are perfect. You know, we're Homo sapiens, we're flawed at birth, and we can expect us, we can expect staff, we expect everybody to make mistakes. What we don't need to expect is for us to continue to make the same one over and over again. So I want somebody who comes into the city who will sit down and understand when they walk out of that door whether they've got a sidewalk in front of their house or not, and if they have to pay in the front. Now, myself, my issue, and I mentioned this, I think when I was talking with them a few weeks ago, is that I think even if this commission says to somebody, you know, we don't find it, it's a special magic word that you use when you're practical to put it in, I still think that person should pay a stipend into a fund. So when we do decide where we want to put things as a city, as far as sidewalks are concerned, we have a fund that we go to and we put them in. And, you know, so we have two mechanisms now to be able to handle it. So I think both of those, if we, I believe, change the ordinance, like Roger was just referring to make sure that every new house has a residential site plan, and we continue to allow the commission the opportunity to take care of the one-offs, and we require that you either put sidewalks in or you put money into the fund. I don't necessarily care for the volume, okay? And I can talk about my place if you want me to, because I'm bringing it up eventually. This house I'm building is on 2.5 acres. Its address is on Lake Elmo Street Road. The only frontage it has on Lake Elmo Street Road is 30 feet where the road goes down. So where does the sidewalk go? And how do you calculate what I pay as a stipend?
You reply to that? So we sent yours and everybody else's to Derek for review, and he drew in where the sidewalk would go on your parcel.
Did you?
And what would be required to be paid into the stipend by square footage.
Okay.
But I think the premise of the question though is that it's a 2.5 acre lot and 30 feet of sidewalk seems out of scale.
Well, and
It may not be.
the place where the sidewalk, the place where the 30 feet is driveway, so it's already,
It's
Right.
so
it's on an unpaved road.
Yeah.
So, do you bring a sidewalk from Lake Helen Road all the way into the property? That's not practical, because the only people that ever use it are the owners of the property. And they're driving their car and put it in the garage. So I don't ever want to take that provision away from the commission to deem something impractical. I also don't want to use that one-size-fits-all formula for calculating how much somebody should pay. I think we should have a rate. I mean, you can change it annually, or you can even put something in there that says, okay, it goes up every year, whatever the inflation is, this number goes up.
80% of the current county
Or just
rate or whatever.
take that number.
Yeah.
What's the average thing that goes in front of a lot? Because I'm not sure that it's fair to ask people that are on 2.5 or 5 acre parcels, about 600 feet across the front of the property, pay the same amount of money for sidewalks, and somebody goes on 100, that has 100 foot frontage. It doesn't make sense to me.
I have one like that right now,
Yeah.
on the east side of Lake Pearl.
Mhm.
He's got 600 foot of frontage.
Yeah.
He's gonna have 3 culvert pipes going in on his drives. He has nowhere to put sidewalks, but are we gonna require him to pay $20,000 into a sidewalk?
And that's why I'm saying it's a one, that's why I'm looking at a number. What's the average? What does it take to go across the front of a 100 foot lot? What does that cost?
100-foot lot?
7 grand.
100 lineal feet times 5 foot wide,
Yeah.
500 square feet times about 7 or 8 bucks a square foot.
So
So it's $3,500.
So if you don't put sidewalks are recommended, okay, you're supposed to put them in, for whatever reason, the board that's in place says it's not practical, you're gonna pay $3,500 each of period, done, no argument, no looking at the formula, none. The only thing that changes is it escalates over time with cost of living with inflation. I think that's fair.
And so are you saying that nobody would put in their own sidewalks and only the city?
Not necessarily, I'm just saying, use that to determine if the board deems it impractical. Doesn't matter whether you put a sidewalk in, you don't, you're gonna pay something.
Right.
You're gonna live in this community, you're gonna pay something into a fund to put sidewalks in, or you can put sidewalks in, one of the two. That's all. Because there may not ever be sidewalks where the 2.5 or 5 acre parcels are.
Yeah.
But for them to put money into a fund and put them someplace else where we'd really like to happen, well, I think that's smart. Anyway, that's fine.
But that all gets back to the first question, is where do you want sidewalks?
Yeah. And I'll let other people weigh in on that.
So to summarize, let me just see if everybody's sort of in agreement, and I'll probably rely on you all to do this, but we're gonna come up with categories of development, and depending on the type of development, it will depend on what you need to submit for your permit, whether it's a full-blown site plan, or whether it's gonna be a residential site plan. My question is, what if somebody's building a commercial property? Should we just call it a building permit site plan as opposed to a,
It's just a site plan.
so we have a site plan, which,
Whether you call it subdivision site plan or commercial site plan, it's just.
They're all site plans, but not all site plans are equal, isn't that what we're saying?
Yeah, each site plan will have its own definition, so we have a residential site plan, a commercial site plan, a
think we already-
multi-residential development site plan.
well, we have a site plan, and then we exempt things from it. One thing we exempt single family residential. We don't want to do that. We want to create some type, we want to keep that site plan intact because from what I heard, everything that's required for a site plan may not be necessary for a residential building permit.
Correct. Because sometimes some of it's already taken care of.
Right. So what we would want, as I understood, is to come up with something to say, to get a residential building permit, this is what you're going to have to submit, and not a full-blown site plan, and abbreviate the site plan. My question is, if you have a commercial development, would you want a full-blown site plan in that? So just residential gets the exception? Okay. All right. But I just need you to tell me, put together whatever you think should be in a residential site plan, the abbreviated residential site plan. And just whatever that should
And then
be.
you need to limit the number of units on that, whether it be 1, 2 family,
Yeah.
or 3 family to the max after. that.
Well, the exemption right now is only for single family.
So I think that's reasonable. I think if you're building 3 houses, you're not building for yourself,
Can you
probably.
build 3 houses on a lot without going to the subdivision?
Yes, you can do
Good,
one
that's all.
family in certain areas.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, you know, the corner up there, where the gas station is,
Yes.
that corner there, you can put.
Now, is multifamily considered commercial?
Depends on the number
No,
of
it
units.
depends on the number of
Yeah.
units.
It's
It's
under
seven,
certain-
more than 7 units by state law is commercial.
Yeah.
That's a good call, but that should be defined. Otherwise, it's false.
And,
Well, I think it says it under the land development code that you can only do up to a minimum, a maximum of 5.
Yeah, but defining between 1 and 5.
But it sounds like the exemption that you're currently at is for a single family
It's,
residence.
it's for a single family home on an existing residential lot.
A single family.
So once you go to duplex, triplex,
Anything else?
quad, anything over single family falls under a site plan. Now, do we want to do an abbreviated site plan for those, or do you just want to say, look, single family home, abbreviated, anything above single family full blown?
Other municipalities handle it this way. When I did a townhome subdivision, which is connected buildings, they considered it, they did not consider it commercial. When I did an apartment complex, they considered that commercial, because it's full-blown parking lot, and they're there to make money. But those folks are not buying those places,
Right.
and that's the distinction.
There's also a distinction though with the way the title is held, the way that
Yes.
your fee simple or not. So
Correct.
townhomes are individual units
Yes.
that people live
They're individual single family residences.
basically.
For the townhomes, I had to do the subdivision planning requirements, and I had to also follow a site plan for them so that each one of those buildings got spaced on their, 6 or 7 or 8 lots. And then there was street parking and other improvements like that. So the last time I did townhomes, I had to do like all 3. And you do subdivision, building permit, and commercial site plan or
Site plan.
planning.
And that would be similar to the site plan that we have?
Yeah.
Okay. So you're comfortable with, everybody's comfortable with the abbreviated site plan for a building permit will only be for a single family home, not existing lot?
Yes.
I would consider duplexes.
Yes,
Duplexes too?
Yeah.
1 and 2 family.
One and two family, okay.
I mean, that would also align you with the building code. We're talking 2 different codes here. And we're talking land development code, and you throw the word code out there, like they're
Universal.
what I'm saying, they're not. You've got land development code, and then we have the building code. Building code doesn't care about something. Once you're out of your house, that's it. You get down the steps and you can walk on mold. As far as the building code is concerned. Land development code is a little different animal, but the way the building code works is they have defined 1 and 2 family as one code, residential code. And then anything above that falls under the commercial building code.
Well, that's probably a good distinction, a good thing to follow.
Yeah, fall under those same lines.
So single family and two family homes
Yes.
will have the abbreviated site plan for permit approval?
And that's 2 family on the same lot, right?
Right, duplex.
In the same structure, probably, so that's
And-
within the same structure.
You know what kind of gets-
Is that within the same structure?
Within the same structure.
It's a same structure, a duplex is the same
No, I
structure, so
understand.
2 lots.
But he didn't say 2 family duplex, he just said a 2 family.
Well, that would be like a subdivision. It would just-
A lot of people build a second home on their one lot.
Yeah. All right, we're making sure.
Grandma.
That comes.
Accessory.
I'm afraid I'm gonna find
It's grandfathered.
Yeah.
I'm afraid I'm gonna wind up in one. Kids bring a wheelbarrow. Come on, Paul, you come.
The last time I saw one in my previous role, it was the building officials at New Smyrna Beach allowed the second structure. The Utilities Commission, whom I work for, didn't allow them to share meters. They had to have their independent meters and utilities. Which I got to deal with that.
And usually, when you think about two-family homes, it's like a duplex. When you start talking about in-law suites and garages or accessory structures, that's treated kind of separately. And those usually have to be permitted, independent of duplex, because you're putting that on a single-family lot. We would, a single-family zoning, we would not allow 2 living units on there. So, a single-family zoning.
Yeah.
Unless it's, you get to a multifamily,
That's
that's
just 5 acres.
no, still no.
It's still in.
Still no. All right, you know, 100 acres, still no. All right, so now back to, and you guys will help me with whatever you think we need to have in there, so I'll put that in the ordinance, I'll create a new section. Good. So now back to the main question, where do you want sidewalks?
Before we move on, the abbreviated site plan is for single-family residence and for duplexes. Where did we land the townhomes?
Townhomes
Because
are
that's,
the
okay, it's
two.
considered a duplex.
If there's two, yeah. If it's bigger than two, then a full site plan will be required.
Okay, thank you.
We need more than 2 dwellings side by side.
Okay.
Well, in answer to your question, I believe in the state and the county's target zero plan, and I think there should be sidewalks on every paved street,
Both sides of the street?
both sides. That's a target zero. They want to get down to 0 injuries and fatalities from anything dealing with vehicles. That means getting the people off the roads.
Can I ask you a question? Because this is a horse community and I brought this up a lot. If gave in the city, you'd be nowhere for the horses to ride. You take away a lot
Nowhere
of the equestrian. You have a lot of areas where the equestrians come through and ride through the city.
I've only seen them riding on the sidewalks, unless there was no sidewalk,
Right,
then they're
unless they
riding on
come
the
down.
grass
That's
or
what,
the road.
right. So would you allocate ride costs or would you just?
That comes underneath the trails and stuff like that. To me, that's a separate issue.
When I ride my horse around town, like a weird thing to say, but when I ride my horse around town, you do need to avoid sidewalks. Most horses aren't shod. I mean, most, play horses like mine aren't shod, and they don't need to be walking on pavement when you can avoid it. So it's nice having a lot of unsidewalked streets around where you can.
It would be nice for the horses to use the grass easements and walk on them, but they evidently only like to poop on sidewalks.
Well, that's where the poop station, you see it a lot. But I think that's a valid point. And while I understand what was the ground, or net zero? Target zero, I'm sorry. I understand the target zero thing. I think we might want to have a little bit different vision than that. And maybe I'm wrong.
I don't think you're wrong.
That seems,
And I'll tell you
for one thing, it seems quite expensive. We're a long way from that.
I'll tell you why I don't think so. It bothered me when we continued to make rules to try to take the stupid out of everything.
That's well said.
At some point, people need to be responsible.
Yeah.
And pay attention to what they're doing. Now, as municipal leaders, I think it's important to have sidewalks on every street. I do. But on both sides, I question that.
I think it's quite reasonable. And one of my parts of my vision that I think I put together in my head is just that, where we have a sidewalk, particularly on a lot of our streets, we have a sidewalk on one side and not on the other. Pretty much anywhere you come to the street, unless you live on it somewhere, you can cross over and get to that sidewalk. You're crossing that crosswalk, it's pretty easy. It is a matter of personal responsibility at that point. And I think it keeps the city less paved. It keeps the city less of an urban feel. And I think it suits us better.
We haven't talked about the impervious nature of sidewalks either.
Less paved, that's what I was thinking when I said that. And you're right, it matters.
One way to look at it.
If I'm not mistaken, sidewalks are exempt from St. John's permit.
But they're still a reality.
No, of course. Commissioner, did the target zero policy account for rural areas and transitioning and urban, or was it just blanket?
I'd have to go back in to look and see how they got it divided out. I know it included sidewalks, crosswalks, stop signs, roundabouts, you name it. Matter of fact, they're having a dealing with roundabouts because the cars don't stop, but people cross, the cars are supposed to stop for pedestrians, but
They don't stop where the cars stop for anybody. It's a
I wish they wouldn't stop, most of them do.
Yeah.
Those things are not octagons, they're triangles, okay? Anyway, we'll get you started. I can even see, let's talk about traffic, okay, and arterial roads of the world. Yeah, I think that probably that's important to have paths on both sides.
traffic and arterial, and particularly around schools and churches.
But to your point about this, is again, having bike paths, I think, in this particular community, I think you're smart. And I would, for lack of better terminology, talk to the horse people and get a sense of where you feel like those should be and designate them as them. If somebody has a house or something on them, then, you know, they, once again, if you have money into a fund, then you can do maintenance, you can install bike paths. Okay, so just because you don't have that somewhere, you need to put money into a fund so we can take care of business. But I like the concept of us being a little different than the American business, and we are. Although we're a municipality, we're somewhat rural.
And every place is unique in its own way, but we're unique, and we should embrace and celebrate that.
How many sidewalks side of the road they go on? Are they gonna go on the left or the right?
Well, to a large extent, it's really a matter
That's a
of,
good question.
well, to a large extent, it's a matter of what looks like it'll work. I mean, you really almost have to put it that somewhere. We've got to put together a plan that looks like it's gonna work, and I think you're right, the horse people, and I think it might be called that. I could be wrong, but the horse people need to be heard, and, you know, those of us, pretty much all of us are pedestrians, they need to be heard.
Just so you all have the information, most municipalities in the area, like my career has been in Blue Ridge County, require sidewalks on both sides of the roads. Everywhere else, I understand the discussion at the table right now, but if you don't want that, that's great. Just the people on the other side need to be able to clear you're going to pay them the fund for something, because otherwise, one side of the road is being treated unfairly.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And then somebody would they have the option of putting a sidewalk in? Like if they're on the other side of the road, they say like, I don't want to pay them, I want to build a sidewalk. Or I want to require the.
If we're actually putting together a designated bridle paths, that would be, that we probably would not want to.
The other thing
But we have never done that.
The other thing you may want to consider is that your right-of-ways are only 40 feet wide for the most part, and most municipalities start at 50.
How does that affect this discussion?
Two sidewalk, well, you have space limitations. So,
It'd be hard for us to put two sidewalks?
And a road.
And a road.
And have room for utilities.
And what we did discuss during the staff meeting is that either the sidewalks will be in the right of way, or the property owner has to give us an easement for the sidewalk to be located. We're not gonna have sidewalks on private property.
Right. But the road, even though it's a 40-foot right-of-way, it's still from the center line. So whether you have sidewalk on both sides or one side,
but it's not always the case.
That's a great idea.
in a perfect world.
This is Lake Helen.
So that will establish which side the sidewalk says, the side that's closer to the center line.
Well, there you go.
And there, and it's a visual thing, kind of, and a matter of preference, and it really does kind of work out that way sometimes.
Well, if you add up the size requirements, the road would be 24 foot wide, the sidewalks would be 5 foot on each side, so that's 10 foot, that's 34 foot. That leaves you 6 foot of green space for the horses to walk on.
Combined between both of the sides, that's just 3 foot on each side.
Yeah.
Right, and it's perfectly symmetrical.
So when you're seeing the roads are 40 foot.
Yeah, you look at the roads in the right place.
It's existing, right?
It's a lot of them.
It's existing.
And you can also adjust the road to one side, so you've got the 6 foot space on one side of the horses.
So none of this is going to work. Yes, of course, they always want to walk on when they're not supposed to. The grass is green.
And I'd like to know how, if having the sidewalk only on one side, how that impacts the safety of people that are, pedestrians and whoever else is using them. And before we make that call, I'd like to see what does that look like.
You're right. We can look at it with a nod to safety. Also, we can look at it with a nod to handicap accessibility and travel through the city. You're trying to travel through the city in an adaptive device. So we need to be able to, have that in mind.
Well, one of the things that we could do is we could look at lot size right out of the gate and say, okay, lot size southerly side, up under an acre, whatever it is, if you're in that particular area, and you can see how it's defined here, you require a sidewalk. Now, you can make the argument that you don't have to put it in, you just put money into the fund, and then at some point the city wants to come in and just do the whole street. Because I personally believe that as we go forward with a stormwater master plan, with sanitary sewer, there's lots of stuff's going to get tore up. So I'm not a big game hurry to put sidewalk in, of course, I'm going to put sidewalk in and then turn around and fix it later. I'd rather see the money go into the fund, even though it may not have the same value today as it's going to be 5 years from now. We know it's not going to, but, you know.
But it does grow and it gives us a base.
Exactly.
Well, we also got some of the forms that I went through, there's also some notes that are done that says that as the city develops roads and everything, they should include sidewalks on the roads, in the roads development plan.
So would that have been when they redid the
She's all that.
Yes.
We can go.
I know one of them in the schools plan includes the section that connects on High Street between Ohio and where the sidewalk ends down. But that's going to be redone according to what was planned for redoing that road, which is going to extend that sidewalk.
So if you were to build so the school board requires a sidewalk within a certain distance of the school?
Yeah.
A couple of miles.
2 miles. 2 miles.
2 miles. So if you were building a house within that distance.
Which the whole city is.
Yeah.
But as I say, would the school district then say you have to put a sidewalk in regardless of what the city says?
There's a possibility they could, but like when they did the sidewalks, they did it all the way down Kicklighter from Macy to the school, and then of course over to Peratt. But they didn't go on any of the side streets. So whether or not theirs only requires arterial roads.
I was working with them at that time, they didn't run it down Pleasant because it was going to require right-of-way purchase. It was going to be expensive, and that's why they decided to run it.
Safety's not important if it's expensive.
Say what?
Safety's not important if it's expensive?
No, they just moved it to where it goes through past.
Well, they created a reasonable
Yes.
path.
It's
And that's
part of
what I'm hoping.
what they call the trail.
Yeah, I'm kind of hoping that's what we can do is create reasonable pathways that give safety and access, but don't pave everything. I want to throw in, I want to let the citizens who are here jump in. We've got some requests.
I just had a question about bicycles,
Uh-huh.
because we don't have any shoulders on our roads for bicycles. They ride on the sidewalks. If there's sidewalks on both sides of the road, there's still no shoulders for bicycles. Are they just supposed to ride on the sidewalks themselves?
You know, I don't even know, that might be against.
By law, bicycles are vehicles and they're supposed to be ridden on the road in the same direction cars are going.
Right,
That's
that's why
by
I'm.
law,
That they have
there
that
comes in the
right.
problem with safety because cars don't pay attention to motorcycles as it is.
Right.
But we live in a small community, and like my child, for instance, there's a group of boys that ride around town every day, and they're riding on the sidewalk sometimes, on the road's edge sometimes, but there's no road edges for them to ride on, so they're riding in the road. Because the white lines are covered by, you know.
And I think their point on our right-of-ways for roads are only being 40 feet. I don't think we have that for roads, like,
Like the 3-foot bike lane shoulder.
and sidewalks. So, you know, I'm tolerant of people, I ride a bike and I'm tolerant of people. I pay attention if I'm spending time on the sidewalk. I pay attention to the people, and I always just turn into the road if I see them, if there's a lot of traffic, and otherwise I would just ride the road. So, once again, we can't fix everything. We have to assume that people are going to be intelligent, make intelligent decisions, they're going to teach their children, you know. And so I think that finding some common ground where we can all be happy is a good idea.
And I don't think we can bring everything up to a code where everything fits on every roadway.
as far as, for a specific
Can I
period.
speak after?
I'm sorry, should I shut up?
We got more people that want to weigh in. No, you don't have to shut up.
For me, for a moratorium, you don't have to put sidewalks in, but you do have to put the money into the fund. And then we can talk about, how much they need to put, okay? And the reason I'm saying that is because, once again, I'm going back to all the work that we need to do as far as underground utilities, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And putting in new sidewalks, putting in pavement, tearing out to do the other stuff, I think is nuts. But so, we want to look at a moratorium period and say, okay, you don't have to put sidewalks in, but you have to put this money into the fund. And
The other thing you can always just think of is, if the city decided in the future that they were going to put a sidewalk down a particular street, they could decide, we're going to do a special assessment down that street, and everybody's going to pay for it, and we're going to put it in at that point.
everyone in the city,
No, we're on the street.
everyone in the street.
We're going to put all the, so on both sides of the street, you just do a
But
special
anybody
assessment.
in the city can walk down that sidewalk. Everyone in the city becomes,
But it's, instead of a piecemeal situation where you're putting in a sidewalk, you're getting a little money, so I'm just saying, there's an option when you extend utilities, which I would consider a sidewalk utility, you can do a special assessment where you're extending it.
At one time, the city put out a notice and a request, any citizen living on a street that wanted to have their section of the street paved in front could pay $500 or whatever it was, and they would come in and pave that section.
really,
When we went down High Street, what's the one with the fountain in front of it? Englewood?
sure.
They had theirs paved, and then it was unpaved, then there was a paved section.
The assessment, it's not optional. You do a special assessment.
I want to open the floor up again for another moment. Ms. Weir?
So, I really like what Debbie said and what Rick said, and when you're talking about paving both sides, I would rather see the one side paved, kind of like the conversation that they had at the last commission meeting, acknowledging at least one side of these areas are paved. Take the other side, do a trail, but also possibly, in the future planning, do a bike trail or a bike lane so that everybody is being accounted for, but it's also keeps to our uniqueness, and we're covering all the areas that, will benefit everybody. That's my thought.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Nancy, I just have a quick question, Kelly, for Nancy.
That's fine.
When you say trail, is that paved or unpaved trail? On the others?
On the other side,
Yeah.
so that we can have the equestrian, because we do have a big equestrian community, and then the bike, lane
Sure.
near
You
on that side.
can do a multi-use trail on the back down Ohio along the field down there. There's actually a horse trail underneath the grass that is overgrown.
Yeah. Kelly?
Okay. So I have a few questions. When we talk about Main Street having one side paved, and we talk about these not Main Street particularly, the main streets.
The arterial.
Yes.
Things like that.
So some of those are county roads. So county roads, the county has provided one side going up Summit. They have one side that they've already paved. Are you looking at residents only on the west? I think that's west. Is that west? Side not to pay, to pay into a paving of.
No, we were saying that both sides, regardless of whether they had it in their front yard or not, would be paying in.
Okay. Okay, that was one question. Thank you. That answers it. Okay, so I'm a little confused. So are we looking at houses that are undergoing repairs that also have to pay into a sidewalk?
This is all new construction, I believe.
Who would you have to discuss?
Well,
They don't know yet.
yeah, it was mentioned in somewhere I saw.
That's current in the code.
Right now,
Yeah.
it's renovations, it doesn't mean repairs, it means going in and making a change to the footprint of the house.
like
Okay.
adding a room.
So my question is John Street, triple S subdivision, we should have already had it in the budget and started a project for our water lines to be placed into the front of our yards. Now, that's a new footprint, because now you have a water line in front of our house. Who's gonna pay for those sidewalks? Would that be the city? It's not my project.
They're talking about renovation of the house, not.
No, okay, so that answers that.
And typically that doesn't kick in, a small home addition doesn't set you above the threshold of what they call substantial improvement. Substantial improvement is typically 50% or more of the valuation.
What we talk about as staff is that was something that was brought up, is when it talks about redevelopment, what is redevelopment? And we thought it would be a good threshold to say when the Florida Building Code says you now have to bring that structure up to code, then the sidewalk will kick in. If you don't have to bring it up to code, then you don't trip that threshold.
So my very last thing is, I agree with you, Commissioner Basso. Our roads and streets definitely need to be repaired before if I'm not saying this the right way, please correct me. The roads and streets need to be taken care of before we add on to sidewalks. We have the infrastructure that needs to be handled first. Or shouldn't that come first? Let me ask it in that question. Shouldn't that come first?
Well, let's just look at it this way, when you do a new development, the first thing they do is they put in pipes, and the pipes they put in first are gravity flow. And the one that go in the deepest, go in first.
Yeah.
And then you work your way up. So the last thing that goes in is the road.
And we're getting ready to do a whole bunch of water pipes in the city. So putting in a whole bunch of sidewalks right now will make a whole lot of sense.
It does not. That's why I'm leaning more and more towards this moratorium period where people, instead of putting it in, you can put it in if you want, but, because we don't want to take that option away.
We might want I don't know how long this water project's gonna take, but a 2-year moratorium sounding good.
Well, not only that, but plus it gives us time to work all the bugs out of exactly where do we want them, how do we want them, do we want private paths, where do we want them? I think it's more than we're just gonna do in a couple of hours here today.
Oh, absolutely.
And so, starting with a moratorium that basically says, if you want to put your sidewalk in your house, we'll guide you in that effort. If you don't, you're going to put money into a fund, and then eventually we get to the point where all of our utilities are taken care of, or at least up to quality to where we can start to pay the sidewalk and stuff over the top of them, and we can start looking at that.
So you're talking about every property that gets developed would pay a certain amount.
Yes.
Well, yeah,
Now,
there's criteria.
once again, I'm talking about single-family residence, I'm not talking about a subdivision.
Subdivision.
Exactly. I'm not talking about commercial.
Can I finish the one?
I'm sorry.
No, was part of that question. So in that being said, you mentioned about the people who are living on the road hitting those assessments. Are we looking at this, you mentioned 2 years. Will that extra assessment that we're going to be receiving this tax roll year?
Yeah, I just do that assessment on it as a way of funding sidewalks if they want to do it in the future. So that's not, there's a whole process you have to go through doing that. So there is no
you
assessment.
understand my question though, to hit us with 2 assessments at once would be
Maybe I should have said that.
hard.
City's sensitive to their assessments. Yeah. So no, I was just telling them that instead of collecting money from people, you could at a later point, do an assessment for the people who receive the benefit of the sidewalk.
And that way it can be added into their mortgage, to their taxes.
Well, you can
I don't
collect it
have
through
mortgage,
taxes, you can
yeah.
collect it, and you can collect it over time, there's all kind of ways you can do that. But I don't think, the current assessment, I don't know, could a stormwater assessment be used to repair sidewalks that are damaged? Or-
Not unless they're part of a drainage facility.
So yeah, we're limited on how we can use that, the revenue from the stormwater assessment.
Thank you.
We're currently in, got torn out.
If a stormwater repair required.
If they need to be replaced because of stuff.
I told this lady I would turn the floor over to her. I'm sorry, I don't know your name.
Oh, it's Mrs. Johnson.
Ms. Johnson, this floor is yours.
Yes, thank you.
Sure.
as I walked around the city and looked at sidewalks, which is what I did for a month, and I lived here for over 50 years, so I kind of know Lake Helen like the back of my hand. Been through storms. I noticed there was a lot of water coming over the roads after Ian. We also don't have room to put sidewalks on roads that the water runs under. We have on the west side of town a lot of roads like that where the water runs under to the lake over on Orange Camp. So you can't cut any sidewalks into that. There are some roads like Pennsylvania that fell in with a gap as wide as this room that I really would take really high caution. That's in front of Miss Cherry's house. The gap was as wide as this room. I know 2 of my puppies fell in and I had to go in and get them. Those types of roads that the water is cutting under probably won't be good for putting sidewalks under. The roads that we do have sidewalks on, the main thing that I'm concerned about as I walk the sidewalks is trip hazards, where the roots of the trees are coming up and pushing the sidewalk up. And the sidewalks being crumpled where trucks go on, or where people take sharp turns and the sidewalk is damaged, so that the kids riding bicycles, which some of them think is fun, but it's not. And you go over these humpity bumps, and that's the main thing I noticed about sidewalks. And the third thing that concerned me was this, and it's something my father passed away in 2006. He told me, Sharon, you got to ask the city about who's going to be responsible for the apron that comes from the driveway. Who pays for that? Because some of the houses here, the older houses were grandfathered in, where they have aprons to the sidewalks or aprons to the road, but some of the new constructions don't. So you got like the house, the driveway, gap of dirt, sidewalk. So if that's there, we're going to have to also find a way to regulate it so that everybody's either required to put a $600 apron in, or you just put shell rock in like we did. We just refresh it every year so that we can get to the road. The fourth thing is, I was one of those kids that was hit on Church Street, meaning our house is on this side of the road and the sidewalk is on that side. And I was a child, I was not careful, and I was bumped, not run over. So it wasn't a bad thing. But the point being is that I
Made an impression.
yeah. So also my grandson had that little whoopsie, and it's not bad. He's grown now, so he just got bumped. Okay. So the thing is that we have to be very careful about where we put crosswalks from the streets that do not have sidewalks to the streets that do have sidewalks. I walked almost all these streets in Lake Helen. Took me a month. I saw a lot of things, but that was the main concern of mine, which is we have wonderful sidewalks that's 20 years old, like along Pravat, or the newer sidewalks, and then we have our older sidewalks and have a lot of tree roots pushing them up, and they need to be repaired, pulled up, and then we got some sidewalks that just, because
Not sure who designed those.
because there were light poles and trees in the fifth consideration. What side of the street are you going to put them on? Now that we got light poles up here, you can't put any sidewalks up, and the ones that I'm seeing is weaving around you ride a bike at like Ohio, you going down that hill on a bicycle, and you're on that sidewalk, whoa, It's fun when I was young, but now it's kind of funny.
Well, that's one thing.
I hit that hill and I'm like, woo, I'm in the street, so, But I understand Lake Helen is quite beautiful from the air, I'm going to tell y'all that. We have a wonderful city. We have horses and golf carts, and everybody just has to look out for each other. That's the bottom line. You're right, you can't make a rule for everything. But I'm just concerned about the sidewalks the trees are taking up. Right now, can we just concentrate on getting those little spots repaired and then kind of move out from that, addressing aprons and aesthetics and all kind of things like that. I do know that we have water pipes going. I do know that we have internet cables going in. And Duke Energy told me during Ian that they were considering going underground on Church Street. So that's something else that we have to think about. So putting a sidewalk down and then having to dig it up to put wires and
They've been doing a lot of underground installation in the land that maybe they don't have
When they do the wires underground anymore, they do it by satellite
Yes.
drilling. So, because they just went down on
I just went down Ohio
With
and
a
I
whole
watched
bunch,
it.
and they did that satellite drilling, so they don't have to tear up the sidewalk.
Right, I watched them do it, it's amazing.
Another thing the Energy Company does is, talk about building from the ground up, they have almost all done already, where they put their poles, they can put anywhere the heck they want.
Mayor,
Yes,
could I introduce Mrs. Sharon Johnson?
yes.
I'm
She-
the one who walked the roads.
She's
and
nice lady to
everything.
produce the map we have here.
Yes. Thank you for your work on that.
Well, we actually paid her a whole bunch of money for that.
Yes, there is, and that was
I'm
nice.
glad to wait her, and I'm still
And she did walk all 54 miles of public right of way. And I'm sure she's a.
And did go in the bushes with my phone.
It's one thing to put it on the maps, another thing to experience it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. But I just want to introduce, because we've used her in the past for various in sundry projects. Anyway, that's it. That's what I introduced her.
Yeah, thank you, I appreciate that.
Is there something that we can do today to have it ready for our next city commission meeting, where staff has something they can sink the teeth into, as far as,
I think the first thing we talked about, I think we have a pretty good direction on that. Which is breaking up the abbreviated site plan,
Definitions,
site plan, all that stuff.
Yeah.
I think we got some good direction there, I think. I'm not so sure about the location of sidewalks.
You haven't, no, we haven't.
About,
No,
I mean, the
that
only thing I kind of,
further.
the thing that makes a little bit of sense is just say, look, everybody's got to pay a dollar amount in, and we're going to build up a fund. Wait a second. And then we will come back with a sidewalk, multimodal, or a sidewalk, bike, horse area. That, and we're all, that money will be earmarked for coming up.
A non-vehicular traffic vision for the city.
Well, that's what they call a multi-use trail, where you can do.
Well, but that's where you put it all in one thing, but we have several different things where,
You might have an area on this side of the street, there's going to be a sidewalk. On this
yeah,
side of the
sidewalks
street,
typically
there'll be
pedestrians,
horses.
and horses are,
Yeah.
so we're looking at private paths and,
what I meant by specifically by some staff to sink the teeth into, is the next person comes in next week to get a permit from Deb, what is she gonna tell me?
What I think you can do, there is something called an ordinance in progress. That, because normally people, they are subject to the rules that are in effect at the time they file their application. But if you have something called an ordinance, one option is to do a moratorium, but a moratorium has the effect of, this may not be zoned, but it would be an ordinance. But sometimes a moratorium, because a lot of times a moratorium is a use, you can't engage in a particular use.
Yes.
So you have to adopt that for as a zoning ordinance. This would not be used, so we would have to, if we did a true, it's not really a moratorium.
sounds like one to me.
Maybe there's gonna be another construction.
Yeah, it's almost like saying,
Sidewalk construction.
yeah, it's almost like we could maybe bring back a resolution stating that there, I could summarize, saying there's an ordinance in process, and until then, anybody who obtains a residential building permit will pay, of course, any building permit, but will pay a certain dollar amount into a fund that will be earmarked solely for sidewalk, horse, bicycle paths within the city.
I have a question. So I have almost all the houses on Lemon coming up. Those are all acreage that are gonna be coming to me, and I'm gonna have to let them know that they're gonna need to pay into the sidewalk fund.
But it won't be, what Rick was suggesting is not something based on the frontage. It would be the same dollar amount everybody pays.
Right, so is there a way that we can assess it when they pick up the building permit?
Mhm.
So they pay a fee, that way it's done, they pay
Yeah,
a fee,
they're done,
and it's done.
Yep.
It would be much easier to assess it that way than to come back later and
That's
ask them.
that's what I'm trying to get to.
Well, you and I, we talked about sidewalks when you brought me your building plan back a year ago. And I know with Brian and Carol, he was very aware that there was a sidewalk that was going to be required. So it's been discussed, and now it's being required on the site plans. everybody that I've spoken to, everybody that I've called, if you're submitting it, you make sure that your sidewalk is on there, and then it goes to Derek for review.
Good. Well, I want to be in a position where we can support, because it sounds like you've gone off up and you're making the rules and doing all the right things over there.
I'm trying to.
Yeah, and I think you're doing a good job of what you're doing. So if I said earlier that staff dropped the ball and didn't give those people, you know, what they needed, well, we don't direct you as what to do. Well, how do you know? You know, and so.
Well, and I need the contractors too. They should come in and sit down and talk to me, because some of them have.
Well, and I get that as well. That's why I said, you show us the camera, that there's plenty of way to go around. But what I want you to do, I want you to have the tools that you need, so we don't have another one of these come back in. You know, it may happen a few times, you know, before we can let the dust settle, but I think giving yourself time to do this right, and just, you know, suspend and put a dollar amount out there, anybody that, you know, this is what you're gonna have to pay to this fund. And so the only thing that I'm iffy about is that if they're adamant about putting a sidewalk in front of the property, I personally say, let them do it. Let them do it, in lieu of paying for the fund. But.
And that should be their option.
Yeah.
They should have the option to tell us whether they want to pay it in fund, work with the sidewalk.
If, I disagree with that as a blanket statement. If it's not somewhere where we want a sidewalk, if they live on the side where we want a bridle path, we don't want to put the sidewalk, as an example. So we need to clarify what it is we want, and that's what Scott has said numerous times. We can decide where we want these things. We won't finish that this meeting, that's for sure. But I think, and the question that Rick asked, is there something we can have for this upcoming meeting, which is maybe not a moratorium, it may not be the right legal word, but a pause or
a resolution.
A resolution.
We're not
saying-
stopping anything, we're just saying, here's a resolution, there's going to be this fee applied until we re-adopt the other ordinances, and that money is going to be set aside for those, sidewalks.
In the sidewalk fund. I don't know if you can define that.
Repairs to sidewalks, additions to sidewalks, installation of new sidewalks.
In the sidewalk fund, which we really do need to create that, but.
That's in the works, but
It's like a sidewalk impact fee.
Yes,
It is, I'm still not calling it impact fee, because I'm sure there's all kinds of studies.
More legal requirements.
Yeah, it's a little bit.
Can we put it under transportation? I have that online.
You got a box you want to check.
We get this included under transportation.
And obviously, you want it to be large enough so it actually helps the city accomplish its goals, but you want it to be small enough where it's not enough for someone to
Change people off.
Yeah, so.
Or, it needs to be a reasonable dollar amount, and it needs to be,
Is
such that it's not.
reasonable as far as the average?
it's the minimum size.
Okay.
frontage. The problem is the homes on Lemon that we're talking about just briefly a few minutes ago, those are what? How many?
They're acreage, up to 5 acres,
Yeah.
2.5 to 5 acres, and some of them.
So do it on a fee based on per 100 feet.
Well, that's why I'm looking for the average. And I don't care if we take the 500-foot ones and add them to the 100-foot ones and come up with something that gives us an average.
You can talk about an average within that subdivision, or?
No, see what?
It'd be a single family, one number for sidewalk.
That was per door.
That would then go into our fund and we would allocate for whatever.
Yes.
I mean, by other, bridle paths.
So would it go into the general fund or the special revenue fund?
I put it in special.
It's a special fund.
I don't know what you're involved with, it's gotta be out of general fund. Yeah, because otherwise it gets all thrown together.
And there again, the fund has certain definitions, and we just want to track the number, and we want to know what's in that ledger.
You can pull the cash, but.
Yeah, it's in the general fund,
It
but
has
it's
to have its own.
earmarked, yeah.
It's going to be accounted for separately.
Yeah, I know, and Kelly, I will come to you, I wanted to, we were kind of working on this, what we can bring to the commission for this upcoming meeting that will be a positive step. Because that's a, we need
I
that.
think so far we've talked about two things. So
Spend
far.
somebody else's money here, so you're not. Right. You're doing the best you can.
Is our definitions. You need to define what residential site plan, plot plan, survey, whatever you want to call it, is going to be and what's going to be required. And if you go to the county, Volusia County has a checklist what they require on their site plans, for the 1 and 2 family dwelling. So I think you need to define that. And then the other big issue is where do you want the site, which we, clearly kicked around. But before you do that, we need to know, what is required on site plans.
That was the first thing we talked about.
Yeah. Going forward, that's what they need,
Well, and one of the main reasons I want this, not a moratorium or whatever we're gonna call it, is because we're going into this major water project. But we're gonna be tearing up a major portion of the city and putting $5 million or so in the water project. That's just throwing in sidewalks right now makes no sense at all.
Yeah, and I want to do this justice. I want to make sure that when we get done with this, we're happy about the arguments that go to our community, whether they're traveling pedestrians or horses or vehicles.
And I want everybody to have, starting with Ms. Johnson's work and everybody else that has I hate the word stakeholder, but a stake in this. From the people with special needs to safety of children to equestrian, everybody needs to have buy-in to this.
Just on the, I know we talked about should somebody have the option to install or not install. How about we say no one has the option to install unless
That's good.
it's a good.
No, that's good.
We were talking about should somebody have an option to install or not. We can just pay the fee. We can say everybody has to pay the fee. There's no option to install unless the commission approves it.
Yeah, and that's in this resolution for a limited, for a time.
But it would also give us time to review the location of that sidewalk versus the location of construction project.
Unless they're in an already approved site plan.
If they're already approved subdivision, that's accepted.
Yes. Yeah, but they're doing the water line and everything.
Oh, yeah, that's all done.
So to your point, Vice Mayor, about the one size fits all fee, you're saying no matter what frontage, doesn't matter what square footage of frontage, they would still be charged the amount?
Yes, and my logic behind that is, I believe we're going to get to a point to where when on those places where there's 2.5 to 5 acres, I don't know if we're going to require sidewalks on either side of the street. And I feel like somebody's got 300 or 400 feet of frontage, and they're 250 feet into their house, and what is the likelihood that they're going to be using that sidewalk? It's more likely that people in the community will be using it than them. Now, with that said, in those particular areas, if we do decide to put something in, I would definitely say one side only, because more likely those people have livestock, and they may have horses that are wanting blood pass. So I don't know if that was the intent with the original comp plan and the larger lot size as we got further and further out of the city, but it certainly seems to be smart.
I think it also kind of fits in the idea of sidewalks being a utility of the city rather than a feature of somebody's front yard.
You're right, I agree.
It's something that needs to have a global look, a citywide look at it, rather than an individual property look at it. And that's where we need to have our vision stand on this over a period of time. It's going to take some, it doesn't work.
So that's why I was saying, that we take the 400-foot lots and put them in with 100 foot and 80 foot, and we can come up with an average. That's what I was saying. Is it 100 foot an average? Is it 120? Because I'm looking at that maximum, $35, $3,000,
And if it's
So it's based on the average, not just 100 square foot?
exactly.
Okay.
well, and even if it's that average skewed towards the lower end of that scale, it's still, we're going to be funding some of this out of the general fund. There's no question, and there's nothing wrong with that.
No.
If we get 20%, or I don't want to put a fixed number on it, but if we get half of the money that we use to building sidewalks out of this sidewalk fund, and have to put the other half in out of the general fund, that's great.
So we might have a creative engineer to figure that out, I guess, it's not works when we do storm drainage. You never know, but those guys are very creative.
I believe it was just briefly mentioned, and my question was, will we take an effect on those homes that have paid for the sidewalks and/or the subdivisions. And I heard something about subdivisions just a second ago.
The subdivision, recent subdivisions where they have subdivision plats, they all are required by the subdivision, approved subdivision plan to put in sidewalks.
Mhm.
So they have to put sidewalks in. So they will be exempt from this fee.
Okay.
They have to put them in. Somebody who's already put in or paid, they're putting in or paid, whatever. But
They
it's
won't
just
be
for new
exempt?
permits coming in, or ones that haven't been final yet. I know there's a couple that may be coming, that sort of just got to get something on the books.
But those who have put in the sidewalk, they'll also be exempt?
If you've already put in a sidewalk, yeah.
Yeah, okay, I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, no, I guess if you were to, well, you got a sidewalk, so there's no reason to charge you. So even if you came back and did a major redevelopment of it, you still have a
We
sidewalk.
still have the sidewalk, yeah. Okay, thank you.
What else do you need from us today to make this? I'm looking for an intelligent answer here. A measure to get you to the upcoming meeting, bring us something that will be really a good step in the right direction, like
It would be staff related, not you.
Okay.
Because I think really the next thing we need to kind of come up with based on conversation is what is an average size lot? And it would be nice to have some type of analysis to do to justify the fee that we're charging. And so we need to come up with like an average size lot. It's in the community.
It's a weighted average.
Weighted average.
Weighted average.
Average seems a little unfair to look at.
Well, let me describe what a weighted average is. You take
Okay.
the top, get rid of it, take the bottom, get rid of that. And once you're left in the middle, you get more of an average. So the 5 acre, 10 acre lots, that area doesn't come into consideration. And the
Right.
smaller lots, which you guys really don't have a lot of small lot areas, but you do, you throw that away and you take the middle part, and then that's what you average. And that's
You can
about
also
the fairest way you can do it.
You got the mean, median, mode. Most of them occurs most frequently. So you can come up with ranges and say, 80 to 100. How many lots do we have are 80 to 100? How many lots are 80 to 100 to 120? And find the one that comes up the most frequently.
So when you come up with this weighted, whatever,
Some average.
some, whatever modifiers you want to put on it, is it going to seem fair to the average?
Well, here's how it comes.
Depends on whether you're the
First of all,
I know, that's what I mean, that's what I mean, the average estimate that comes
To
in.
answer your question, and I think this is the answer, is I think it's gonna be closer to the smaller lots.
I
So
agree.
to begin with. Second thing is, there's a really good chance that the smaller lots will have sidewalks in front of their houses. So the people that will be at a disadvantage, if you say, are those people who pay into this that don't wind up with sidewalks in front of their house. But as you talked about it as a utility of the city, that's how we need to look at it, because that's really what it is. It's not somebody's personal sidewalk that goes with their home. That goes from that sidewalk to that front door.
I mean, it's,
What about basing it on percentage of construction costs? Which Debbie put out a good point is that, for example, $300,000 house, if you did 1% construction costs would be about $3,000 for the sidewalk fund. And if you had a 100-foot sidewalk, you're looking at about $3,500 when we did that averaging. But if you came up with a percentage based on the construction costs, which we do for plan review, we do for permit fees anyways, is based on construction costs. And if there's ever a question of that, we always default to the ICC tables for this region, which is what virtually every jurisdiction does. Because, somebody can say they're gonna build something for $20,000 and the ICC says it's gonna be $200,000, we have a problem.
Yeah.
So we use their, their tables.
Well, the percentage of construction costs sounds like it might be a way that fairness would seem.
It's an easy tool, plus it also gives you the multiplier,
Yeah.
because as construction costs go up, so does.
Right, because as concrete goes up, everything's gonna go up, I think it's
Exactly.
fair.
And it also, people that live on, that's,
Debbie did it, but she didn't,
it takes corner lots out of the.
I threw her under one bush, she was right.
Or the other one is the sidewalk goes up to the side.
Yeah. That solves a lot of the fairness issue.
I mean, we have a big house that's going in on Lemon. The house is gonna be it's gotta be $1 million, it's 10,000 square feet.
Well, let's gouge them.
What I'm saying, they're one of these that's gonna be unlimited, and a lot of people have put in their voice about, they don't wanna see lemon torn out. They don't wanna see the trees that go down
I agree.
on the north side torn out to put sidewalks
I
in,
agree.
when nobody will access them to the house. It's just like, they have to go in front of the historical preservation board for a sidewalk, a
And that's,
walkway from the front of the house to the sidewalk that's non-existent.
and that's a perfect
That's
example.
another 200 feet.
Yeah, that's a perfect example of why we want this moratorium on keep using that word because it works.
And also why I would really want the commission to have a last look at the one-offs in those particular situations that, you know, we can make rules, regulation, ordinances until the cows come home and try to fine tune them to where they fit every situation, but we're not going to do that.
And
Eventually, there's going to be something that falls to the cracks.
another thing a percentage of construction cost does is doesn't, you know, if we put in $3,000 a day, if we have 20% inflation, that's going to be really skewed quickly, but it won't, if we make it a percentage of construction costs, that will never address
That'd be
that.
built in escalator.
Cameron, can I ask a question?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I don't know your name. When you just talked about that and you talked about $3,000 for a sidewalk, maybe Rick can help here. What is the average cost for a sidewalk? I know I just had concrete work done and it was a lot more than that. And I know there was somebody locally who was asked to put in a sidewalk and got a quote for $16,000, which is a lot more than three. So I guess my point is, if we're asking them to pay into a fund, we want it to be reasonable. We don't want to gouge them, but we want that fund to be able to fulfill its needs in the future. So,
Most municipalities either have their own annual contract or they'll piggyback off the county. And you know, the county's got one that we use. So what is their rate right now?
Right now,
$6,
it's $7 per foot.
$7 a square foot?
Which is what we use for that $3,500. But to address your question, they're not all the same. I mean, depends on if there's trees, what's in the way, how much grade has to be taken out. You know, there's quite a bit that could vary from lot to lot, but if it's just plain flat work and concrete versus, you know, like in a backyard.
it wasn't, I don't think so. I believe Miss Smith's daughter had a pretty basic area. It seemed excessively high, the quote she got.
It also
I hope
does
she
that.
got another quote.
Did she? Oh, no, I don't think she,
Who was it?
It also
Miss
depends
Smith's
on the
daughter.
cost of labor.
And also, we're not seeking to fully fund every future sidewalk in the city. We're seeking to create a starting point and create a fund to pay into a vehicle to start collecting them towards this. Like I said earlier, I don't think we're going to collect more than 20% of what we ultimately want to pay into sidewalk beautification in the city.
I think it's the right way to go.
But I think it gives us a starting point. It gives us a place to go from, rather than just nothing. I think we'll probably have 20% coming out of the sidewalk fund and another 8% coming out of the general fund as part of our budget. But that will cross that bridge when we get to budget time. And that's something I don't want to forget when we get to budget time, which is not far away.
Just to one more thing to that $7 a square foot number, it's probably the bottom end of this flat work spectrum. And there are multipliers beyond that, just like Mark was saying, trees, if sod needs to be removed, doesn't need a concrete one to bring it around the backside of the house. It's, you know, there's each and all of
Different
those
areas.
escalated costs, yes.
I just want to make sure that we're paying, I guess I don't want to seem like, if we're not building them, if we're not putting in a sidewalk, I mean, if, say I'm building a house and I've been quoted 10 grand for a sidewalk. If I'm not putting that sidewalk in, shouldn't I at least be putting 8 into the fund? I mean, do you see what I'm saying?
Yes.
And not 3, because I think we should be fair. We have sidewalks to make. Is this fund also going to repair any of the sidewalks that we have that are?
Well, like Cameron was saying, we can't expect this fund to pay for everything.
Right.
But keep in mind, some of the people that pay into this fund won't have sidewalks in front of the house.
Right.
So that money, I mean, that's going to make twice as much good use out of it because it's not being used at all.
For the maintenance,
It's going in for repairs. And
Yeah.
sidewalks are for the city, sidewalks are for people to get around within the city, to get to the churches, to get to the grocery store.
Well, they're also in the
To
county.
get to our parks, things like that.
Well, and one thing that came up, I went to the Sunrail event, groundbreaking last week. And the new plan is to bring that trail all the way out here to 44 to the college. So, and I believe you have spoken about this, Rick, about completing this portion of this trail on Summit all the way out. So when we talk about these things, you know, I don't want to gouge my neighbor, but I think we should be fair and smart and kind of have a big picture for all of these different things.
I agree.
I mean, I think what you're saying, this very makes sense. If we're only charging $3,000 because the cost of construction, you know, like we said, was $300,000, if that doesn't cover the cost of the sidewalk in front of that residence, then that doesn't really make sense.
Right, but when you start taking homes like the one that's gonna go in, that's gonna be close to $1 million. You take that kind of money, you take it from homes that are gonna be $500,000, $600,000, $700,000, and there's gonna be, all the limit is gonna be right around that mark.
So Faith Grove.
That's a lot of money.
And-
And Faith
And they don't have
Grove.
sidewalks on them.
Well, Faith Grove has already got theirs,
Yeah,
their
they've got
sidewalks are
sidewalks
already
built in.
included in
It's part of the
theirs.
subdivision.
You know, that's kind of a subdivision. But a lot of the new construction that is coming into the city is higher in construction. Nobody's coming in here and doing a modular home. They're coming in here and they're building substantial homes. And those substantial homes can generate a nice chunk of money to the fund without having the little guy who only has that 100-foot of frontage, who's building a house that in today's market is gonna cost him $400,000.
Yeah.
There's $4,000 into a fund that can start to help to make a progression to build the fund.
And I understand that, but I'm saying even if it were 2%, it is still better, cheaper than if they had to have it installed. And it's a plus for everybody. That's just my
Well, we can
thought.
look at that, absolutely. I mean, that was, we were just throwing the number out
Yeah.
there, just, 1%, because,
How do we assess?
it was easy for me to figure 1%.
And I think the percentage is a great way. I don't know that 1% would do it, but maybe 2%. You know, like I said, I don't want to gouge them, but I want it to be, you know, they have to think, do I want this, if they're given the option, you know, what is their position on it, so.
Well, it'll be good to have because we'll need to let them know, and it does, it's hard to go to somebody after the fact.
Oh, I
And
know.
say, look, you're gonna, you know,
Yeah, that's,
because we were at a point, we were like, well, these are city streets that are dirt roads, you're not gonna be required to put in sidewalks. And that's what we told them. You know, and now, at the point now, especially after the Main Street issue, you know, these people are on dirt roads, they're not on roads. I got a house that's gonna go in on the corner of Tangerine. There's not a sidewalk on there.
So we're talking about requiring a payment of a percentage of construction fee on places where there will never, ever have a sidewalk. And that's why, one of the reasons, you're talking about 2% as opposed to 1%, we're bringing in a lot more homes. And there's all the homes now will be paid towards it, as opposed to 25% of homes were paying before. So it's going to increase the amount of income.
Collected one time for
Yeah.
transfer.
And now we'll have nearly everybody paying a little bit into it. I think it'll be a real benefit to the city, and it's in the right way.
Just as I was sitting here thinking, no member of that presentation, I briefly gave you about the difference between taxes and fees. So what I was typing is an email to Chris Roy, the person who does our assessments, to make sure that we're not setting up a tax.
Surcharge.
Yeah, if it's a tax, it's illegal. So, you know, but it's, and I keep going back to one of the main cases of the city of Port Orange adopted a road fee that was going to be paid to help maintain the roads. Well, and the court declared that to be a tax. And it invalidated it. So I sent him an email, and it made, you know, this is different. We have it right now where you build a sidewalk where you pay a fee. We can just go back and build a sidewalk. But can we go all the way to say you have to pay a sidewalk fee with no option to build a sidewalk? That's a little different. So
That's a very important question we need an answer to before we land on this, isn't it?
Well, But I think one of the questions that you need to address though too is if you do that, is if if they choose to put the sidewalks in, and later on, the sidewalks have to be repaired or replaced because utilities were put in or whatever, who's gonna cover the cost of putting, re-putting the sidewalks that the person was put in?
So I said, that's what I said there.
Okay.
That's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah, we've got to have that answer before we do
Yes,
this
it does.
resolution.
The home builder building house and then.
Sounds like fun.
I mean, it's, we give the option right now to pay it to the department, so.
Right now, because it's an option, it's not a tax, basically.
Because you can avoid paying that by building the sidewalk. That's one of the things they look for, can you avoid paying it?
And that makes
It's
sense.
usually, you can avoid, usually, typically, I mean, at least from their standpoint, you can
And what
avoid
we're
it.
talking about is a way where nobody, it's exactly what we're talking about, a way where nobody can avoid it. So we maybe,
When
it
we
makes
discuss
no
this,
sense to me, but maybe it just won't work. We do live in a bigger environment than just our nice little town.
If we do it at the percentage construction cost and we leave it as an option, especially in an area that doesn't have any water repairs coming within the next 5 years, leave it as an option for them to put in a sidewalk. And
I guess.
well, then what we would need to do is adopt an ordinance, making it clear that you have to put in a sidewalk no matter where you are.
And also, we can't say that they're never ever going to
This has to be done.
because we don't know the
That's,
future.
never is.
Time to finish this.
You know, we're
So what we can come back and we can do an ordinance, the first reading of the ordinance, taking away the obligation, the limitation of collateral material. Take that off and just say, make it clear, everybody's got to pay, put in a sidewalk, or we can pay a fee. And then we can do the resolution, that might make it more defensible, but I'll find out.
Yeah, and if somebody takes and evaluates how much it's going to cost to put on a sidewalk and evaluate the percentage of cost of construction, they're going to go with the lower amount.
Yeah.
But that's why it's incumbent on us to be close.
If it's a big enough number, somebody will challenge it. Sure. So.
Well, yeah, that's why you're here. I appreciate it.
And that's what concerns me about the 1 or 2% of the $1 million house, because that's where you're challenged.
Yeah.
So I need to pay for something I don't even have in front of my house.
Right, and we don't want them to, we don't really want them to have the option to put it in because the house you particularly mentioned there on Lennon, we don't want a sidewalk put there.
Not according to one of the reports I read, that's was one of the streets that said we need to put a sidewalk on.
I had one homeowner say, I refuse to tear the trees down in front of my house, because I designed my house with the trees, because I would pay to put it on the other side of the road if I have to.
Well, you can do a sidewalk with trees, that's what they call a sidewalk. Sometimes that's more aesthetical to a
Sidewalk is back
Yeah.
to the garage.
Back to the trees.
Oh, some of those trees, I know what you're saying.
I've seen some straight sidewalks that be in.
I built something straight once, at least by my standards, yes. Well, what else do we need to do today? I mean, to really finish off this sidewalk discussion and presentation.
Well, is everyone in the commission reasonably satisfied with the direction we're going?
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
Excellent.
Good meeting.
Yes, yeah, it was a good meeting.
Basically, what we're doing is we're going to do something as quickly as possible. We can use staff an opportunity to get down the road, and then we can take our time to make all of our paths where we want, when we want. And when I say taking our time, I don't mean just to drag our heels on it so we get done with underground utilities. I mean, let's take a good hard look at where we want bridle paths and where we don't. Where we need sidewalks on 2 sides of the street, where we don't.
Yeah, creating something that is a vision shared across the entire community. That's one of my weakest things. What's
I
that?
know we said, I'm sorry, I'm just coming back to this one more time. If we do a percentage of construction costs, I would like to see what the difference would be if we take the average frontage and do the math and to make sure we're getting the right percentage.
We could do a percentage of construction costs with a cap, based on linear foot.
Right, right, exactly, so we don't want to overcharge, we certainly don't want to undercharge. If 1% is not enough, we might need to bump this 1.5.
It's like a blood out of turban, right?
But that's the only way I can see to make that.
Right, I would
Does
just
that
like to
make
see the
sense?
difference and make sure that we're charging the right percentage. If 1% is not adequate overall, and we need to bump it to the 2% that was suggested, then, you know, I'd like to examine that and just, instead of just throwing a number out and saying 1% or, you know.
Well, it has to be defendable.
Right, exactly.
It has to be
Make sure we
defendable.
have the right,
And I think 1%,
based
well,
on the average frontage.
yeah, well, Ms. Weary's comment about 1% doesn't cover a sidewalk in front of one house, but we're looking at a vision, what I'm hearing, that doesn't have a sidewalk in front of every house. So our vision would be, if 2% would cover it, and we're looking at putting them in on only half of what we're looking at, that's perfect. If we're just doing it on one side of every street, then 1% covers a 2% cost. And it does reduce everybody's costs individually. I do understand what you were saying, or maybe I just read into it, but what you're saying, if we have $1 million home and they only have 150 linear feet of sidewalk, that would be something that would get challenged and
Well, I'm
rightfully
zooming
so.
out. I think maybe you're zoomed in and I'm zoomed out now. I'm saying overall, if we're looking at the city as a whole, we're saying we need this amount of sidewalks and we need to be making sure that we're putting them in here, here, and here. And we don't charge enough to cover that 20% mark or whatever it is. We need to make sure we're charging the right amount. They'll just say 1%, they'll just say 2%. Let's make sure we're charging the appropriate amount.
It would just my take real quickly would be, it would seem to make more sense the charge would be based on how much it would cost to install a sidewalk as opposed to how much the house costs.
Okay, yeah.
Because you could have a very expensive house on a very small lot.
Well, that's what I'm saying, so if we had it as a percentage of construction cost with a cap for linear feet.
Yeah.
If they have 450 linear feet, and it's $1 million, yeah, frontage, I mean, yeah, road frontage.
If the price of linear foot is price per square foot, and they got 500 feet of frontage, and all of a sudden it's $15,000 they gotta put into a fund, that there's not gonna be any sidewalks on their house. I can see where that would be a problem.
And where it would be a challenge.
And what may end up coming back to you is first reading on an ordinance that eliminates the restriction of arterial collector. Spells out a little better on the what is practical, not practical to install. It gives the option to pay into a fund, and we leave it at that if I don't get comfortable with this not being
Gotcha.
a tax.
In other words, well, even if there was that, there would be an opportunity for those individuals to bring it in front of the commission.
Right.
Back to that, where this is optional again, and we'll just use the 50%, if we're putting sidewalks on 50% of the road frontage, because we're putting on half of, one side, not the other, so call it an even 50%. So if our charge on any given road frontage in front of a house is 50% of that, it's $3,000 as opposed to, if they're, if it would be more reasonable for them to
No, I agree. I understand what you're saying.
not pay in and pay towards the sidewalk fund, because that's going to be the cheaper option than putting it in almost every time. That they still have the option, they could put in the more expensive sidewalk if they felt like it, because they didn't want to support this fund.
Right. Or they just want a sidewalk.
Yeah, and
But I said, if I come back, then if we take off collateral arterial restrictions, every street on every property has to have a sidewalk regardless, and on both sides,
Yeah.
every side.
yeah.
Just
But I know what you're saying.
But that is,
Yes.
we have the legal authority to say we can do that, but give them an option to pay the fee. But if we went to one next step further and said, we're not gonna allow you to install a sidewalk, we're just gonna levy a fee, and that's what converts it to a tax, then maybe we have to default back
Yeah,
to saying, everybody has to install it, or you pay this fee.
okay,
So,
yeah.
until we get comfortable on, that it's not being a tax.
I have one more question for the commission. We have 11 homes under construction. I I have 3 that are on Ontario or Collector Road. The rest are not, they're all either on back dirt roads, Jackson, Hobart, places like that. What do I need to tell my clients?
We're working on it.
I would say for sure the minimum would be, when they submitted their application, then if they're on arterial collector,
And,
you said there's 3 that are on arterial collectors.
2 on, I have, well, they're all on the route.
Yeah, technically all those fall under the.
There is some of those streets that the residents have asked us to pave them, and if we pave them, we're gonna put in sidewalks, so.
Have we issued the building permit for those 3 houses?
Yes.
Yeah, they're finished, they're almost complete.
They're on this problem.
Yeah, if they'd be outside of they're already issued.
I think whatever we're doing has to apply to a fresh application.
And I think we have to give them an effective date, starting, and make notice on the building department door, effective whatever, 1 August, that from this day forward, this will be collected.
One other wrinkle too, you got, and we had down on Main and High, you got corner lots, so they got 2 streets. And how do you do with those?
Well, they have to do, it's just like the one on the water, if they were to put it in, they would have to do that corner, because it's a lot.
Well, true, but what for?
I think corner lot people should win water. I think corner lot people should win water. Well, that's the first thing that happens, and then they get cheated out of how much they can build their houses, because they have 2 front lawns that you have to have setbacks on.
Yeah.
So there's your relief.
Yeah, that's good, it is.
I gotta do a better one. I can
What about
also
mine
in
on
the
3
front,
streets?
3 road front.
Plenty of money.
They own the whole corner. They own one, and the shed, and then the
Let's call that the Roger exception.
No, it's not, it's a garage, because it's in the.
Yeah, the sidewalks, at least the doors, it's where do you put
Yeah.
the garage?
And now we got 3 roadsides, and they don't want the garage facing the roadside, it's gonna be facing the rear, but there's nowhere to put it.
Just pretend one of those roads isn't there. Nobody has that problem, so we'll just pretend they don't.
That's good, they're saying you can't, regulation applies to everything.
One of your leverage positions, Deb, is you can always tell them, you can bring it to the commission, because I hate it when you do that.
You're gonna be bringing. You guys have a few weeks.
But yeah, Scott was just saying that, this is one of those things that's just so rare that it really does require a one-off solution.
What about people that have already been made it from the,
Too bad they didn't have such enlightenment commission.
Most of them are within the subdivisions neighborhoods, and those are already fine.
whenever there is?
141 Main
Street.
That was in the gateway, that's all, that's.
Yeah,
No comment.
you follow the rules.
No comment.
You follow the rules, they did what they were supposed to do. And this is the result of us taking a deeper look at our sidewalks and pathways and bridle paths. I really do think they're important to the city. And I think it's important that we recognize the sidewalks aren't the fix-all and all everything. I remember seeing a bumper sticker when I was first in Oregon. This is, it was in the early 80s. It said, "Don't California take Oregon."
What did it say?
Don't California take Oregon. And
They saw it coming, didn't they?
the point is, we don't have to Mickey Mouse like that. We do not have to do what everybody else does. Just because it's easy. That's one of the things, this is not from anything else. They look at all the things you can, and we can't do it, we can't do that. Well, we're gonna have to do this, and that's the only way that we can do it, so that's what we're gonna do. No, take the time to figure it out. Take the time to figure it out. This process that we're going through right now creates that window of opportunity for us to take the time to figure it out. And that's what we should do. That's what's best for us to do.
Well said. And I think staff has enough to go forward. We have one other item on the agenda for personnel issue.
I do, Mayor, but I'd rather just pull it and talk to you all individually. It's nothing urgent.
Okay.
And it's getting late.
I appreciate that. I'll let you, I'm good with that too. It is getting late. I want to say that I'm not going to be here at the next commission meeting. My goal goal is to keep it a non-controversial meeting, but I think, I don't want to not have a meeting, because people have a right to get their COs done and all that kind of stuff. People expect us to function. But I know you're not particularly fond of chairing meetings. Do you want to chair this meeting? It's not required, but
If I don't do it, it doesn't.
anybody could. You can, some cities,
No, that's all you.
okay. Some cities don't, nobody on the commission ever chairs. And it's chaired by an independent body.
Follow through is best thing.
You know, it worked out good enough.
I was gonna suggest Dominique, because she needs the experience. Everything else gets thrown on your desk, doesn't it?
No, I will not shrink from our responsibility.
But anyway, that's, just want to let you know, I'm not going to be here. And, my apologies for that, but have a fun meeting.
You enjoy yourself.
Anything else? Anything?
It's gonna be coming back to you know,
I know the resolution's coming, but it sounds like something that we're all kind of in agreement on, so I don't think it's going to be particularly controversial.
We'll keep
If it blows up in your face, I'm sorry, but I don't think it's going to will.
I'm sorry, but oh well.
Yeah. Probably very
I'm
good.
going on vacation.
Does anybody else have anything to bring
One
up
thing
there?
is that the commission would take at least one of the maps home with you and start scribbling in marker. I love marker. Take it and make an exhibit and make it pretty so that staff has the ability to say, you are in this box. You are required to do something with recycling. So if you would, please, that would be helpful for us. Okay.
Yeah. Anybody else? Thank you all, ladies and gentlemen. Meeting is adjourned.
You're in this box.
if it's color, you're actually, we were, especially if you get this meeting, we just decided we could like we wanted to advertise.
Well, it is. Having but do we
I sent myself around I got a number for
He wants to
and it's funny that you say that because there was a message from the transit Lisa to me. I sent that to Rob. My recommendation is you need to give the people a life and see what they want to do. Yeah, I told her.